welcome to Disastrous History. Today we're going to talk about the deadliest accidental fire in American history, the Iroquois Theater Fire. Now, it was the deadliest fire in American history up until September 11, 2001, when the World Trade Centers surpassed it. But it is still the deadliest accidental fire at 602 deaths. Now, this particular theater had just opened a little over a month prior. The fire took place on December 30th, 1903. The theater itself opened on November 23rd, 1903. So these were some of the first showings in the theater. Now, at the time of its opening, it was struggling to gather people inside because, well, there were labor issues and it was cold and just a whole host of issues in general. So on December 30th, 1903, when they had an absolutely full house that was majority women and children for a matinee showing of Mr. Bluebeard, they were incredibly excited. Now, the Iroquois Theater was specifically built in the part of Chicago, Illinois that it was because it was in a shopping district, and the people that they wanted to attract to the theater was primarily women on day trips going shopping, often with their children, because they knew they could sell more tickets that way if they're putting on shows that attract women and children. And the area of Chicago was heavily policed by the Chicago Police Department because it was the shopping district and they didn't want a high crime in that particular area. Now, the theater itself was billed as absolutely fireproof, which is technically correct. The actual building structure, the stuff it was made out of, steel, stone, all of that, was fireproof. The material inside the theater was not fireproof. Now, back at the time, people were very concerned about theater fires. There had been several, including one recently in Vienna, Austria, that had killed well over 100 people. There was the Brooklyn Theater Fire in 1876 that caused 278 deaths. Like, that was a very common thing. So it was very common for buildings that were made out of stone or steel or whatever to build themselves as absolutely fireproof because the actual structure of the building would not be affected by fire. However, that is completely ignoring the entire interior of the building being impacted by fire. As we know now, you can't, advertise something as absolutely fireproof. It does include the interior furnishings, but they could put it on things and say, yeah, we are absolutely fireproof because, well, the building itself wouldn't be damaged by fire. It was more for insurance than it was for actual fire safety. Now, the building itself had some fire safety attempts, I will say attempts. There were multiple fire exits on one side of the building that had fire escapes. All of those doors opened outward. There's a myth in the Iroquois Theater Fire that all of the fire exit doors opened inward. They did not. None of the doors, well, there was one door that opened inward, but it wasn't an exit door, so it doesn't really matter. But none of the exit doors for the Iroquois Theater Fire opened inward. They all opened outward. However, they also had, on top of the actual stage, they had basically vents that in the event of a fire would automatically open, which would allow heat and flame and smoke to escape out so that the people in the actual auditorium and on the stage would have longer to escape before that upper layer developed and descended down, which causes a lot of deaths. The other thing they had 6 fire extinguishers inside the building. Now, these fire extinguishers were called kill fire. Essentially, they were sodium bicarbonate, and instead of spraying them, as you would think with a normal fire extinguisher, you had to open them and then try and throw the material onto the fire to extinguish it that way. If the fire is on the ground and you can actually throw it on there, works great. If the fire is not on the ground and you can't throw it that high, works slightly less great. There was no general alarm system. There was no box alarm for the fire department outside the theater. There were no sprinklers, and there was no phone to be able to call or anything like that to get a hold of anybody in the case of a fire. It was essentially, they had the fire extinguishers. They also had a curtain that was supposed to be able to drop down to prevent the fire from spreading on the stage into the auditorium or from the auditorium onto the stage. It was made of mostly wood pulp with some asbestos mixed in, so it would have been unhelpful in the best had it worked properly. Spoiler alert, it wouldn't work properly. Now, the Iroquois Theater had an official capacity of 1,602 seats. But on the day of the fire, December 30th, 1903, there was anywhere from 1,700 to 2,100 people inside the theater. You see, they would oversell tickets for standing room only. Essentially, people were sitting in the aisles and pretty much anywhere they could find to sit. And there were three separate levels of the Iroquois Theater. There was the very bottom level that had about 700 seats, and then the second level, or the first balcony, had 400 seats, and then the third level, or the gallery, had about 500 seats. And every single one of those seats was full on December 30th, 1903, for that 3 o'clock showing of Mr. Bluebeard. Now, at around 3:15 p.m., just after the beginning of the second act, during a musical song known as In the Pale Moonlight, a fire started from a broken arc lamp on a muslin curtain just on the left side of the stage. So if you're sitting in the auditorium, the fire started on the left side in one of the curtains. The man who was running the actual light himself had explained that the lamp was too close to the curtain, and he had complained numerous times that if there was a problem, the lamp would ignite the curtain. He was effectively ignored. So when the fire started in the curtain, he attempted to beat it out with his hands, but was unable to. He clapped when the fire started, which alerted everyone else on the stage that there was a problem. They looked up, and the fireman for the theater, a man by the name of William Sollers, attempted to douse the fire with one of the fire extinguishers. Unfortunately, the fire spread quickly up the muslin curtain and then up into the fly area above the stage, which was a very big, wide open area that was full of thousands of square feet of fabric that was painted with flammable paint. So basically, the scenery would drop down, they would do their scene, they would pull it back up, and then they could drop down a different one, pull it back up, drop down a different one. So it was completely full of wood-framed fabric covered with paint, and it was incredibly flammable. So when it spread up so quickly, he tossed the canister up there to try and put it out. It just fell on the ground. It didn't do anything. Now, at this point, they attempted to go put down the asbestos fire curtain. When they did, it got caught on a wire that was hanging across, and it effectively would have been useless anyway because it was mostly made of wood pulp with some asbestos, mixed into it. Wouldn't have done much of anything. Now, with the fire quickly spreading up in the fly area above the stage and smoke beginning to pour out into the auditorium, many of the people in the auditorium began to try to evacuate out the various exits. Some went to the fire escapes, some went out through the front door, which was the only entrance into the auditorium. One of the actors for the play, a man by the name of Eddie Foy, walked out on the stage and was trying to direct those in the crowd to calm down and evacuate orderly. He stood on the stage with burning material falling down around him and spent most of the time before attempting to exit trying to calm people down, get them to go out safely and orderly. The problem was, backstage, stagehands are also trying to evacuate, and there are several exits from the backstage, but one of the big exits is a giant set of double doors in the very back of the auditorium, or the very back of the backstage. They are giant and tall so that you can bring in those stage sets that you have to put up. They're really tall, so they have to have really tall doors. When they opened it, wind rushed in, which fed the fire above the stage and allowed it to shoot a fireball that went right out this way. So it's coming, fire's burning up in this area, it shoots out this direction. So anybody up here is going to have a massive fireball coming at them. Now, as that happened, people began to attempt to run across the top of the chairs, right? Because if there are people sitting in the aisles on either side, all the way up, there's people sitting in the aisles. Everyone that was sitting in the seats is still likely going to be waiting. If you've ever tried to leave an auditorium at any point in your life, you have to spend a lot of time just kind of waiting by your seat, waiting for everyone to fill out, because these narrow aisles only allow usually one person at a time. So people are still waiting to try and evacuate out this direction. When this fireball comes through, the people that are still in these chairs decide to start running across the top of these chairs towards the back to get away from, the massive fireball. The problem was, if you look closely at these chairs, you'll notice that they're the type that flip up. So as people attempted to run across, if they missed the back of the chair and stepped into the actual seat cushion. Their foot falls down in between, and numerous people on the first floor, the second floor, and the third floor became trapped with broken ankles and such and burned to death, trapped by the chairs attempting to run across them. So with all that being said, let's get into how this fire actually developed. And we're going to start on the first floor. Now, the fire itself started right about here with the arc lamp, and it's quickly spread up over the stage this general direction. So we have the stage here, we have the auditorium here, and we have the foyer here. Now, the stage itself is here. We have a box seat. These are all of the seats. Now, initially, the fire was mostly confined to the stage like so. And the actual setup is the stage. There was a door back up here, and there was these two doors right over here. We're gonna circle the doors in green. So there's these two doors right here. Right here, there's a door here for backstage, and then there are several other exits from the backstage area. And this is important because as this fire develops, it's mostly going to be up above the stage with smoke beginning to emit out over into the actual auditorium itself, off in this direction. And it's mostly just going to be smoke at this point. It's going to be developing the upper layer inside the actual stage itself as it's burning, and then lower down and come out from the stage itself. Now, I had mentioned in the beginning that there were openings at the top of the stage that were supposed to open automatically in the event of a fire to let heat and smoke and all of that out. They were nailed shut. So they obviously did not function properly, which allowed smoke buildup in the actual fly area above the stage to build up and then eventually go out into the auditorium itself. Now, as people were attempting to escape from the stage itself, because again, remember, it is entirely fabric and wood, so as it burns, it's going to fall down on the stage and set more curtains on fires and hit people as it's falling. So people in the stage area are exiting out this door here, and they are opening these two giant doors here and going out this direction, because this is an alley back over here, right here. This is an alley. The problem is when they opened these two giant doors, they were incredibly tall, so they could bring in those big set pieces. When they did that, it provided fresh oxygen to this fire, which caused a massive fireball to erupt out towards the auditorium itself, up underneath the actual curtains and all of that. Now, that is the specific backstage exit and why the fire was able to spread into the auditorium itself. We have to look at the actual doors for the auditorium. Now, one of the big things with this fire is the doors themselves. Again, there's the myth that the doors for the Iroquois Theater fire opened inward, and that is not the case. All of the doors opened outward, but that doesn't mean there weren't problems with them. Now, the Iroquois Theater had fire escapes. The first floor had 3. They were on this side of the building up here. These 3 doors right here were all fire escapes. Now, the problem with this is that they weren't fire escapes in the traditional sense that you can think of right now, or at least the modern day sense that you think of right now. They were actually a set of double doors. And what I mean by that is, let's draw this real quick. So you have an exit like this, right? And you have a set of doors on the front like this that were wooden and glass that opened this way. And then on the exterior, you had another set of doors like this that opened out to the fire escape. So these doors in front right here had what are called the bascule locks. Essentially, you had to pull a lever down to lift it up to open them. They were not common in the United States. They're not common in the United States now. They were very common in Europe, but they were used in the Iroquois Theater. So when people attempted to exit out of the fire exits here, they were first met by these locks that they were unfamiliar with and didn't know how to use. Eventually, they did force them open. But that brought up our next issue. So you see here how this door right here, these doors open outward. You have your fire escape out here. The problem is that all of these fire escapes, now this is the first floor, so these open straight up into an alleyway, so you just walk out on the ground. But these doors open outward. So if anybody comes out this door, right here and immediately comes this way, they could be hit by this door opening because it opens outward into the alley. Now, this will become a bigger issue later because the fire escapes aren't that wide. So when these doors open outward, they partially block the actual fire escape, making a traffic jam of people on the fire escapes themselves. The problem is with this particular level is that they were concerned about people on the outside sneaking into the building without paying for tickets because it is the first floor. So this middle fire escape right here, fire exit right here, was locked. It was never opened. This one, also believed to be locked. It was eventually forced open by people inside and people outside, but it was likely locked at the time and eventually managed to get open. Same thing with this one. This door, likely locked, however, was eventually forced. People did manage to get out these two side ones right here. This one was never opened. So that is the fire escapes. Not working the way they were supposed to, but they were eventually able to be used. But if we move down to the foyer, so this right here is the main way that everyone comes in. And in disasters, people often attempt to go out the way they came in. So a lot of people are going to try and exit out the foyer. So the way these doors were set up to exit from the auditorium into the foyer was there was a bifold door here. So in order to open it, you have it flush like this. You have to fold it so that it goes like this. And then there was a single door that swung outward like this. So it swung this direction, right? The biggest thing with this particular area is during shows, they kept most of these doors locked. So this exit here, both sets of doors, both the bifold and the single door, locked. This exit here, both the bifold and the single door, locked. This exit here was a different story. This door right here, the single swinging door, this one, was locked. So that one's not usable. They were able to get the bifold door open, which allowed for some people to exit, but not nearly enough at the same time. So a crowd crush formed on the back side of these doors as people tried to exit out this single bifold door. Moving next into the actual foyer itself, we had another set of bifold doors that had to swing and then single ones that swung open. Again, this one, locked. This one, locked. This one, this door, the single man door, was likely locked, but was eventually forced to open by a crowd of people. This one opened just fine, which then led into the lobby, and then the lobby doors were actually unlocked. So pretty much anybody that managed to get through this single set of doors and then this set of doors managed to get out the lobby and to safety. But the problem is you see these right here on either side, right here and right here, are the stairs down from the second floor. So not only do you have the 700 odd people in this area attempting to come out this way, figure half of them at least are attempting to come out the way they came in through this single set of doors right here. They all come into this foyer. You also have people that are coming down from the second floor who are trying to get out this single set of doors here. So now you've probably effectively doubled the number of people who are trying to jam their way through this foyer out into the lobby to get out of this building in a panicked state. A large chunk of them are going to be children who are going to be terrified with their parents who are also going to be terrified trying to get their kids out. This was an absolute nightmare. And honestly, the first floor was the best option for anyone to actually make it out. And it has a whole bunch of problems, as we can see. So that's the first floor, but let's talk about the second floor now. So on the second floor, you had your second level of seats going up, and there were approximately 500 or so on the second floor. Now, on this floor, you have 5 total exits. You have your fire exits, your 3 fire exits on the top, right here. Exact same as the bottom one, except they're going to be at different heights because it kind of sloped down like that. All of the first floor was all on the same height. The second floor is going to be sloped down going down because it's a balcony, so it like angles up like this. In addition, you have this door over here and then this door over here. So you have 5 potential exits for the people on the second floor. We're going to go through them one by one real quick. So you have your first exit here. This fire exit, same problem as the first floor. can't figure out how to open the lock, eventually force it open and manage to get it open. So this one eventually does work. Your next one here, this one is locked, never managed to get it open. This one right here, they managed to get open early, but there was a major problem with the exterior of the fire escape, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Just know that this one was able to be opened. People were able to escape out of it, but the other side of it was an absolute nightmare, which we'll get to in a minute. The next one here is a double door. They both swung outward, so they both swung this way. Unfortunately, both locked. The door was never opened. Then you have another exit right here. Now, this one is a little bit complicated because it wasn't technically locked. However, there was a problem. You see, this is a double bifold door, so you have to push them open like this so they spread apart like that. And when the second floor was built, they decided to raise the back end of the second floor balcony up 24 inches where it was originally designed to be. And when they did that, they didn't change anything on the interior. So you walk out on your landing here, it was just a 24-inch drop. So what they did is they built stairs in this area right here to be able to walk down so that you didn't fall. The problem was the stairs weren't all that wide. In addition, they made them too tall. So when they tried to open these doors right here, when they slid open, they would only slide part way because the floor on the other side was too high and the doors physically couldn't get open enough. So only one person could get through at a time. Eventually, there were approximately 100 to 150 who ended up smashed back behind this door trying to get through and ended up forming a crowd crush and dying in a giant pile of people. So that's the second floor. Now, on the exterior right here, you obviously have your stairs down that go down to the first floor. You go down this direction out here. You go down this direction out here into the foyer, where we've already talked about how that was already a nightmare of people from the first floor trying to come down. But additionally, you had your third floor stairs right here. People were coming down from the third floor and then going around to go to the second floor. Now, when we get to the third floor here in a minute, there weren't as many people coming down from the third floor as you would expect. However, you still had some that added to the flow of people going down the stairs, attempting to get out the front of the building. Because remember, most people are going to exit out the way they came in. And most people came in this direction up here and through these doors here. So a lot of people are going to either see the traffic jams that are occurring at the fire exits up here and attempt a different direction, or they're just going to straight go this direction because that is the way that they came in. That's what's first in their mind. When you're in an emergency situation, you want to come up with the fastest solution as quick as possible. So it's likely that the second floor was also an absolute nightmare. And so now we move to the third floor. Now, the third floor was set up similarly to the second floor. We have our 3 fire exits at the top, all set up the same way. And then we have 2 exits here. We have one here and we have one here. Now, again, similarly for all of the other fire exits, all of these doors, very difficult to open because of the locks that people were unfamiliar. Luckily, none of these were locked. None of the fire exits on the third floor were locked. So they were all opened. However, they would cause problems on the exterior of the building. I'll get to in a minute. This door right here was not actually a bifold door. It was a trifold door. So essentially, you slid it one direction. This one, able to open easily, people were able to escape. This door right here, which was directly in front of the stairs, was locked. Because of course it was. Why wouldn't it be anything else? So that door was impossible to use. Now, all of these, the second and third floor, all had the same problem. When the doors for the back of the stage were open, that fireball would have erupted from underneath the stage and shot out. And especially people on the third floor would have suffered greatly. If you look at photos of the third floor, there are numerous photos in the seats and whatnot of clothes that are just scattered all over the floor. And one of the questions that often gets brought up in the aftermath of the Iroquois Theater fire is, why are there so many clothes everywhere? Well, when that fireball erupted out, it would have ignited seats and it would have ignited people's clothing as well as their hair. So what's the first thing you do when your clothing is on fire? You rip it off. So numerous people attempted to escape, ripped their own clothes off because they were on fire. But additionally, there was clothing all over throughout this area over here. This is because as the fire got worse, as this fireball erupted across, a crowd crush formed here. And as people were managing to make it out the fire escapes, they were being grabbed by people behind them and having their clothes ripped as they're trying to escape from the fire. Okay, so now we have to talk about the fire escapes for a moment. Now, if you're looking at this on here, this top level right here, this is the third floor. All of these doors are all third floor doors. This one here is the second floor. These 3 doors right here is the second floor. This set right here, obviously the first floor. All of these are connected to the first floor. Now, you'll notice on the second floor that this particular door right here seems to be floating in midair. Well, that's because if you remember back on the second floor, on the opposite side of that door, they had changed the height of the second floor, but they didn't want to change anything else. So they just added another staircase or another set of stairs on the other side. Well, on this same side, they raised the back portion of the second floor, but they had already installed the fire escape and they didn't want to move it. So they just didn't. So the door opened and there was a 24-inch drop straight down onto the fire escape, which doesn't feel like a lot, but when you're running from a fire with your child, it is a lot, especially when you're not expecting it. So as people ran out of the building and attempted to escape, they would trip and then fall right here. And then they would fall, the person behind them would fall, and the person behind them would fall. And eventually there's just a pile of moving humans trying to get up off of this fire escape to get down to safety. The people inside the building have no idea what is going on the outside of the building. All they know is there's a fire coming at them and they want to get out. So they start pushing, and people in the front get pushed over and fall over the railing and fall down to the ground and die. There would end up being a pile of people at the bottom of this particular doorway who fell off of the fire escape down to the ground and died in that area in a giant pile. In addition, what I had briefly hinted about is these doors opened outward onto the fire escape, which is great. We want doors to open outward in a fire. That is how you get out of a fire quickly. You don't have to deal with a mass of people trying to get out and try and pull a door towards you when all of that weight is pushing up against the door. That being said, it wasn't fully thought out. So the purple line here is the wall of your building. The blue line here is your fire escape. We have our fire escape door right here, right? It is split in half. When that door opens, your door is going to swing like this, and it's going to be sitting like that. Same thing this way. Door opens this way. So part of your fire escape is going to be blocked by the door itself. Now, as people come out, this door is going to be in the way. So people that are running down the stair this direction who manage to make it out are blocked by this door. People who get down this way, blocked by this door. Same thing here. Blocked by this door, blocked by this door. Now, the other issue is that if you're coming out, if your flow of direction is this direction, right? People coming down from further up the fire escape are going to be blocked by this door right here. But the people coming out here trying to get out this fire escape are going to be partially blocked by this door here because you're going to want to go this way. So you have all these people coming out. People are going to get jammed against this door while trying to get around through this very narrow crack between the fire escape railing and the door itself. So what this did was cause people to end up being pushed over the fire escape railing and falling to their deaths. And that wasn't the only issue that was causing a jam on the fire escape. Specifically on the second and third floors, both of these fire escape stairs were made so that they could be retracted. The problem was the Iroquois Theater had never had a fire drill. And during construction, they were put up and then they were never used. So it had sat out in the elements and it was frigid cold. On that December morning. It was very cold. The fire escapes themselves were basically frozen solid, and a lot of it was pure ice. And these had never been opened. So when people attempted to get down them, they couldn't get down. So the people that made it to the bottom were jumping, the 10 to 12 feet down to the ground, which isn't great, but it won't kill you, especially if you have control over your fall, which at that point, the majority of people would. The problem is that when you get women and children and people that are not expecting to jump 10 to 15 feet down to the ground, they're going to be scared to do it because while it's not a great fall, it's not a fun fall. It is scary, especially landing on the street. So people would hesitate to jump and then eventually would do it. But that causes a backup here, and it causes a backup here, and that backup continues to build. At that point, your fire starts blowing out all of these doors. And the people that haven't made it out onto the fire escape are coming out of the building literally on fire. So, in order to escape that, people begin to jump over the railing higher up because they have no other option. Their only option is to jump because they can't wait for them to jump down here. They need to get away from the flames now. So numerous people jumped higher and ended up dying, colliding with the street because there was a massive traffic jam of people on these fire escapes before they could get out. In the end, 602 people would die in the Iroquois theater fire, 575 in the actual theater itself and in the alleyway on the outside, which is called Couch Place now in Chicago. Others would die in the weeks afterward. It would be the deadliest building fire in American history, again, up until 9/11. Now, in the aftermath of this fire, there were numerous building codes that were changed. Number one, emergency lighting was added to basically everywhere. There was no emergency lighting inside the Iroquois Theater, and almost immediately lights went out, and the only way anyone could see was the glow of the outside as well as the glow of the fire. In addition, panic bars were added to exterior doors, which is the ones where you just have to push up against them and they immediately open. In addition, they added fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, direct contact to fire departments. All of those kinds of things were changed in the aftermath of the Iroquois Theater fire, simply to avoid having a disaster this catastrophic ever again. Now, one of the stories that gets overlooked during the Iroquois Theater fire was one of the only stage workers that died in the disaster. Her name was Nellie Reed, and she was an aerialist for the show. Her job was to be on a trolley wire, and she would fly across as a fairy and drop pink carnations down onto the audience members to kind of make it a three-dimensional thing. When the fire started, she was up in the area on her trolley and was waiting to fly out for her part. When the fire happened, it spread upward, and essentially people forgot she was there and no one brought her down. Eventually, she fell down from her place, landed on the stage, and then survived with severe burns, but would end up dying from the burns and the internal injuries from dropping down on the stage several days after the fire itself. When firefighters finally managed to make it inside the building, there were several locations where they found bodies piled up 10 feet high, where people had climbed on top of others in an attempt to make it out a door they couldn't get out. Some people were still alive in the piles at the very bottom who had been protected by those who had taken the brunt of the heat and flames above them and managed to pull them out. Several people weren't burnt at all and died from positional asphyxiation, basically being stuck at the bottom of piles, and as they breathed out, their lungs did not have room to expand, and they essentially suffocated from the weight of the people above them. In the end, the Iroquois Theater fire remains one of the most enduring fires in American history, and the lessons that we learned from this particular fire have lived on forever. Inside any theater or any major building that you go into, you can see the after effects of the Iroquois Theater fire, the exit lighting, the lighting along the rows, fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, panic bars, lighted exit rows. All of those kinds of things are specifically because of all of the deaths that occurred from the Iroquois Theater. Now, in the aftermath, several people were arrested in connection with the fire, as several people knew that the building was basically a death trap if a fire did occur, but no one was charged or convicted with any official crimes in any capacity. It was officially ruled an accident and things moved on, although the changes to fire code did take place. With that, we've reached the end of this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, like, subscribe, comment, do all those things. And remember to stay safe and check your smoke detector batteries.